2006 saw the release of Superman Returns, the first live-action movie to feature the Man of Steel since Superman 4: The Quest for Peace. And following a long period of developmental hell featuring multiple pitches, scripts, concepts, and lots of silly internet memes. Now, your mileage may vary as to whether Returns was a good film or an absolute bore, but quite frankly, your mileage on the film is totally and utterly irrelevant, because today's subject matter has very little, if anything, to do with the film it's supposedly based on. That is, unless there's an unreleased director's cut that features Superman in the Fortress of Solitude playing the Kryptonian equivalent of Sudoku. That is the concept that serves as the general basis of Superman Returns' Fortress of Solitude for Game Boy Advance. Because, you know, making a side-scrolling Superman game on a handheld format was apparently a bad idea, if that one Superman game for Game Boy is any indication. Electronic Arts opted instead to give Superman fans who owned a Game Boy Advance in 2006 a logic puzzle game of sorts. Because sure, why not? That's exactly the sort of quality game that's worthy of the Man of Steel. A puzzle game where Superman does not punch anything. In all honesty, I've both played and seen worse, so let's check it out. There are 3 game types in Fortress of Solitude, 2 of which comprise a good majority of the game, with the last bit coming every once in a while. Once per chapter, I say. The first game mode, represented by yellow logos in the corner, is essentially the Kryptonian equivalent of Sudoku, the classic game of logic where the goal is to place symbols in such a way that you complete rows, columns, and entire boards without placing 2 of the same symbol into the same row, column, or board. Early chapters start off easy with relatively small boards, but the challenge heightens as the puzzles get larger and starts throwing in more icons for you to position. Basically, if you're competent at Sudoku, the game of elimination should come second nature. For those less versed or less patient, you have some superpowers at your disposal, including a time-stopping power and supervision that will give you clues as to which symbols go where, and so on and so forth. It might feel like a bit of a cheat, but your powers are not unlimited, and ultimately, it's not about solving a puzzle the right way or anything like that, it's about solving it quickly. More on that later. The second game, represented by the blue icons, is a little more straightforward. It involves filling rows and columns with icons to light them up. Once all the squares are light, you clear the board. Starting from the middle wildcard, you are allowed to place icons that are either the same color or the same shape, or in some cases both, as what's already there. The footage does a better job of explaining it than I could. It's more of a straightforward affair than the Sudoku puzzles, and so of course there's fewer of these types of puzzles than the Crypto Sudoku Ruiken or whatever it's called or something. Like the other form, you can use your powers to change the icons in queue or stop time for a short bit. More on that later. Fortress of Solitude comprises 20 chapters, each with a number of puzzles for you to solve, as represented by the crystal slots, which are subsequently filled as you complete the puzzles contained. Some crystal slots have one puzzle, while others have a series of puzzles that must be completed. Completing all the puzzles within a chapter will unlock a snapshot from the Superman Returns film itself, and once you've unlocked all 20 chapters, you're then tasked with repositioning the images in chronological order. So if you haven't seen the movie, you're shit out of luck. Then again, it's not like anything worthwhile happens if you did know and did put the pictures in order, so whatever. The caveat with all these puzzles and chapters and things of that nature is that you have a set time limit to complete all the puzzles in a chapter, and the time you take in solving each puzzle or each series of puzzles is deducted from the time limit. So if a chapter gives you 15 minutes to solve 7 crystals worth of puzzles, and it took you 10 minutes to clear one, then guess what? You only have 5 minutes left to clear the rest of the puzzles in said chapter. On top of that, every wrong move adds 30 seconds to your time, and it goes without saying that plenty of stupid mistakes will end your progress in a hurry. Fortunately, you can redo puzzles to try and finish faster, which can be a helpful bit and restore some of the time. Every so often, like I said, probably once per chapter, you'll get an alert letting you know of a threat that needs taking care of. Whether it be Parasite attacking the fortress, or Metallo wreaking havoc in Metropolis, or whatever the case may be. This should get you excited, as this means Superman might do something super for once in this game, but don't get too excited. It's just a scrolling shooter and a rather basic one with its own puzzle elements. The goal is to meet a quota of red and blue crystals that you can earn by destroying enemies. Blue colored enemies can be destroyed with your heat vision, while red colored enemies can be destroyed with your freeze breath. Survive the end of the level with the required number of crystals collected, and you'll be treated to a slideshow of Superman defeating said foe. Yeah, it's not much of a reward, and part of me wishes I was fighting the bad guy instead of having a slideshow, but whatever. Fail to beat the quota or run out of energy by running into too many bad guys and nothing happens. You'll continue whether you win or not, although your superpower will be severely reduced and you won't be able to use said powers until you gain some of it back if you lose. That's really the only real penalty, and whether you win or lose, the opportunity goes bye-bye, so whatever. Control is pretty simple for the puzzle segments. The D-pad moves the cursor, A button confirms selections, B button uses your selected superpower, start pauses, select cycles through your powers, and the triggers are used to cycle through the chosen icons. They're straightforward, they're functional, they're responsive, there's not much else to it. Controlling Superman in the shooter portions isn't too bad either, but he does move about a bit too loosely for my tastes. In any event, it's no big deal because the shooter portions really mean nothing in the long haul. In terms of the puzzles, there's quite a few of them, and there's a nice consistent curve of difficulty in the early chapters where the game tosses you smaller boards to fill before tossing you the bigger ones in the later chapters. Some of the superpowers help in expediting the process, but there's no obligation in using them if you prefer a purer playstyle, for lack of a better term. Later chapters have you required to clear multiple puzzles in order to attain one crystal for your rack, and if you fail or quit during the run, the whole thing has to be redone. The final chapter has you rushing through numerous puzzles within a 35-minute time limit, and if you quit or run out of time, it's back to square one. Fortress of Solitude offers an understandably bare-bones presentation. The playfield and various icons look alright for the most part, they're pretty clear I guess. The fortress backdrops are not much to look at, and there's not much else in terms of visual variety. The shooter portions aren't too shabby, only a handful of backdrops and enemy types along with the Super One himself, and they look fine for the most part. Nothing particularly impressive, but still good enough. The snapshots of Superman fighting the bad guys aren't too badly done. Well, they were at least able to nail Brandon Routh's likeness, the guy who played him in the movie, as he's surrounded by poor CG renderings of various stuff. The movie snapshots you unlock aren't of the best quality, but it's good enough for the standards of the Game Boy Advance. Serenading you throughout the game is some of the most generically dull-sounding music to grace a video game. That may be a slight exaggeration on my part, but listening to the same 3 or 4 tunes throughout, trying to be dramatic or trying to recapture the emotional gravitas exuded by the John Williams composed, or in this case John Ottman composed soundtrack of the Superman film, gets to be a bit grating after a while. A situation that isn't helped with some annoying sound effects tossed in for good measure. To the surprise of absolutely nobody, the recognizable theme that people often associate with Superman is obviously not in this game. Overall, Superman Returns Fortress of Solitude is a rather unremarkable puzzle game whose only notable aspect is the license in use. You could take away the names, the iconography, the logos, and anything associated with the Superman brand, and it'd still be the same game. Setting that aside, Fortress of Solitude is an adequate collection of Sudoku puzzles and does a functional enough job of it. There's enough puzzles of varying difficulty to keep you occupied for a bit, there's enough tools to give you a helping hand with just enough of a limitation to keep it from being a permanent spamming feature. It's not a bad serving of logic puzzles if you're into that sort of thing, but if you're not into that sort of thing and you just want a game where Superman punches things, well, you're not going to get a whole lot of that from Fortress of Solitude.